Hello, mate.
Hello again.
How are you?
Not too bad. Different setting.
Different setting today.
Different setting.
A little bit nicer than ours, I'll be honest.
Tad little.
Tad nicer.
Yeah.
Another special episode today, mate.
It is indeed, yes. We've been invited to the Department for Education by the Minister for Schools, Georgia Gould. How are you doing?
I'm good. Delighted to have you here.
Good.
Again.
Thank you very much. Again, yes.
Yeah,
obviously,
always here now.
We were was it just before Christmas? It was, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So, but it's nice to actually come down in the day. Because obviously the office was empty, wasn't it? There's nothing here,
Of course,
so
yeah.
everybody working.
And it's sunny today, so...
Yeah,
sunny.
absolutely. And it's World Book Day.
World Book Day.
Tell us about World
Book Day, because it's not just World Book Day to you, is it?
Yeah, we were just talking about this. So my mum was a publisher, and many years ago, in like 1998, I think, she, with a group of other publishers, actually founded World Book Day. It was all about opening up access to reading and getting publishers to provide these £1 books. Mm-hmm. So it's actually been so nice today because my little one is 2. It was his first World Book Day at nursery. He was dressed up as a little tiger, and I got my mum to come and read to him in nursery, and it was like a proper full circle moment, like really, really special to see, what it's become, which has just been absolutely amazing.
Quite cool.
It was just so cool.
He thought you were dressed up for World Book Day as well.
Yeah, so I was trying to explain to him about dressing up. You're a tiger, like the book, and he looked at me and was like, "Oh, mummy, you're dressed up as a flower." So which I thought was quite smart, actually. Yeah.
Well.
So thank you for inviting us down here. First and foremost, because you didn't have to. You actually wanted to come on.
Yeah, I really did.
It wasn't us pestering you. It was you kind of saying,
I was pestering you.
I'd like to come on. So thank you for that.
Well, I know you have a big audience.
Yeah.
I know that this is, there's a lot of information out there. And I just, I'm really keen, firstly, that everyone joins the consultation, but also that, get a sense of where we're coming from, the plans in detail, and, is part of that dialogue. So I'm very grateful for the opportunity.
Cool. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
You're ready?
I hope so. I don't know. You're scaring me now.
Let's dive in. Let's start with a nice, easy one, the tribunal gap. So we'll go straight in there. So the white paper says parents can appeal tribunal decisions about specialist provision packages. Mm-hmm. But the day-to-day support sits inside individual support plans.
Yep.
If a school writes a poor ISP and refuses to improve it, what legal route does a parent have to challenge that?
Yeah, so I think within the new system that we're keeping the tribunal as a really important backstop to the needs assessment, to the specialist provision package. And in terms of the individual support and education, when we're saying in the new system that will be written at the setting level, but that the specialist provision package will set out like the broad entitlement that a child, should have access to. So, it could be access to physiotherapy or a certain kind of curriculum, or that kind of wider entitlement. The reason we're setting that out, just to start there, is because at the moment I hear a lot from families that actually a caseworker is writing their child's education plan that's actually never met the child. It's often not updated. I was actually just talking to someone this morning who was saying that their EHCP had outcomes from year 5 and their child was 17. That is, it's not a live document that is helpful for schools. We want the individual support plan to be a document that is developed and collaborated at a school-based level. So if a parent is unhappy with a specialist provision package, that broad entitlement, they can still go to the tribunal. On the individual support plan, we're saying that will go through the school complaints process if you're unhappy with some of that day-to-day provision.
So just to clarify, parents, again, cannot challenge the adequacy of an ISCP at tribunal.
Not the ISP. They can. Yeah. It's the kind of the provision.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that leads quite well to the next one then.
Okay.
Which is the complaints panel.
Yeah.
Okay. So the complaints panel will have one independent SEND expert.
Yeah.
Yeah. And everyone else is made up of school governors, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Okay. So if that expert is outvoted by everyone else by the governors, essentially, what's the outcome then? Essentially, that is a possibility, isn't it? That
I think that the reason we're putting that independent person onto the complaints panel is we are really aware, and we've heard from a lot of families, that there is a real concern that there is not that knowledge about special educational needs and disabilities within some of those complaint processes, and that their voices aren't heard. And so it's to bring that expertise. So we expect them to have real weight as part of that decision making at the complaints level. And so it is, but that kind of sits alongside the wider accountability that will sit on schools in the new system. So schools will have a legal duty to develop individual support plans, to develop inclusion plans that meet these new national standards. So, the minimum expected ordinarily available provision, that will be set out nationally. The duty to develop targeted and targeted plus layers of support, to collaborate with families on individual support plans, all of that will be a legal duty. So that there will be an Ofsted, as an inspection regime, will be looking at that in terms of what they look at schools. So but we're really aware and have heard very clearly that there needs to be a way that parents can raise that individual concern, and that is why we're changing that schools complaints process to bring that independent send role into it.
Okay, it's great. It's great that there is going to be an independent send role on there. What if they did get voted out, for example? They were voted out, and the parent then still wants to challenge it. She can't go to tribunal at this point, can she? Because the last point is the complaints.
So you
panel,
couldn't go on. So if you want to challenge a complaint that is made in that circumstances, the next route would be to go to the DFE. But then if you are unhappy with the broader education your child was getting, so you were in the targeted plus group and you were unhappy with the individual support plan and you've gone through that whole process, you could, it's always available to you to ask for a needs assessment to get that specialist support. So that is another route into support as an individual family. If you had felt that actually it just wasn't working, you tried everything within that school and you just thought that your child was not getting the kind of support they needed, you could then go forward and ask for a needs assessment. And if you were unhappy with a local authority judgment about that needs assessment, you could go to tribunal.
Okay, so I was going to say, because the biggest issue parents are going to have is they'll be relying on the local authority, which obviously, as you know, I know you've heard it a million times before, the local authority is what a lot of people have got an issue with. So this
100%. So and actually that was something that changed as part of the engagement. So one of the things we were looking at is that decision about a needs assessment potentially going to the local government ombudsman. That was to make it kind of faster and cheaper to get that redress. But, the families, the disabled children's organisations we were working with were really clear that they felt that needs assessment needed a legal backstop. And so we changed that. And in the proposals, the tribunal backs up that needs assessment. But I think the thing I really want to say to families is we will have failed if we're in a system where families are having to, if that is the way they're getting support, if families, the only way they can get support is going through all these different processes, going to the tribunal around a needs assessment and so on, it has to be a system that is much more collaborative. And within the document, there's a commitment to co-design the assessment process, because something I've heard time and time again is that can be a really, really difficult process where there's not a lot of transparency, everyone disappears for a long time, and then you get a judgment and parents and sometimes even Senkos and support staff don't feel that they are heard as part of that process. So that is something we want to do throughout the consultation, is to improve that and make that better. But we also want to hold local authorities to account on their performance. And, that if there's been one message I've heard so strongly from families is just the powerlessness they feel of watching things get worse and worse for their children, and nobody is listening to them, and they can't challenge that, and that and unless they're going through the tribunal process and all the expense and stress that entails. So we want it to be a backstop, but it would not be success for us if that was the main way to get support. So in terms of that local authority accountability and support, so we're putting more funding into local authorities. Your listeners will know that many local authorities have developed large deficits, so we're going to be supporting 90% of those deficits around the country. But that money is conditional on every council developing a send improvement plan that we are shortly going to be writing to councils about, and that that will be based on their performance on a whole range of metrics that we're going to be monitoring very closely. And we're going to be really clear that if there is failure, we will intervene. And we've said in the document, if there is sustained and multiple failure, then we have the right to take send off a council and move it into a trust, as we have in children's social care. So we are really, and this is something I really feel deeply because I've heard how hard it is for families. We, as the DfE, have to be really holding systems to account for their performance for families. It should not be on the burdens of individual families to have this fight time and time again. We have to be doing this at a national level, and that does mean putting in the right support and funding, but it also means stronger accountability, and we're really committed to that. But I know it will hopefully offer reassurance that given everything, every family, if they are concerned that their child needs specialist support and it's not being offered, and they're not happy with the kind of system we're building. I move my hands too much when I talk. But if they're not happy with the system not happy with the support their child has, and they think they need something more, they can ask for a needs assessment, and that will be backed by the tribunal.
Okay, I've just got a quick one.
Yeah, of course.
Obviously the 90% debt
Mm-hmm.
that is going to get written off, you said it's conditional.
Mm-hmm.
Do we know what those conditions are?
So we're working through them at the moment.
Cool.
So that they will, and we'll be making that, setting that out.
There's a concern that
the
some
performance metrics that we will be holding councils to account, and people, I bet you're going to say people are concerned it's only about the money, and not about outcomes. And I just want to really assure you, this is about outcomes for children.
Yes, I think the worry would be that some of the conditions might be make sure you don't issue X amount of.
No, it's the opposite.
Great.
This is about we need to see better timeliness of decision making. We do want to see more support earlier. There are some children and families who are having to go for a statutory process when they could have been well supported if a support was available earlier. We want that. We don't want to force people into that statutory process, but this is not about taking that route away from families that need it. So the kind of things we'll be looking at are, the number of children who are out of education in a place, the number of inclusion bases that are attached to mainstream schools, the kind of the range of the specialist support available, the kind of journeys that children are making. There's a whole range of different metrics that we'll be looking at, and timeliness of decision making around EHCPs. And tribunal judgments. And another really important area of accountability that also came from the national conversation, actually was a Disabled Children's Partnership idea from their Fight for Ordinary report, is to bring more transparency to the tribunal process. So at the moment, it can be a bit of a black box. We don't know. We know on a national level, but we don't really know locally about the tribunal judgments, how many families have gone to the tribunal multiple times, and how local authorities are responding to that. So within the consultation, we are saying that we will be asking local authorities to kind of publish regular information about the tribunal judgments, but also critically what they're doing to address the problems that have come out of those tribunals. So it brings real transparency to that system in a way that I think it hasn't at the moment, and hopefully give families reassurance that we are expecting local authorities to act on where there have been failures and where they have been found to be in breach of the law.
Cool. That sounds really good. Accountability for local authorities is massive.
And transparency.
Yeah, transparency as well. I'm going to ask a question as well. You've touched upon it there, Georgia, the backstop question. Again, we get inundated with this from families again and again. So the reforms will reduce conflict between support, because support will be delivered properly through ISPs. If the system works, tribunal use would fall anyway.
Definitely.
So why remove tribunal access for the adequacy of ISP provisions?
So I think what we're trying, it's not about removing tribunal access, it's about where that decision making is made. I think our concern about the current system, and we've heard this from and we're a lot of the time we're talking about special schools here, so from special schools, is they will end up with an EHCP that says things that actually they don't think are necessarily, and the parent doesn't think is in the best interest of the child, written by someone who's never met the child, sometimes copied and pasted from another report, whereas actually they want to develop a kind of education plan with the family, with the young person at that setting. So it's about kind of distinguishing the day-to-day plan to that legal entitlement. So the legal entitlement will still set out the kind of broad entitlement, like, you know, access to intensive physiotherapy, or, you know, the access to a certain kind of social and emotional support, or a setting that provides this kind of support. So that will be kind of at that legal level. But actually, you know, we're saying at day-to-day education level, we genuinely think it will be better for families, young people, and schools to set that out, and to have an individual support plan, and that actually, you know, that's a much more collaborative way of doing things. So trying to distinguish, you know, between the stuff that you can just get on with and work at a school level to push. But I think, you know, these are all areas that, you know, this is a consultation. If, you know, that those who are listening are thinking actually you've got the balance not quite right there, you know, I really encourage you to kind of suggest ideas, to be part of that conversation.
Yeah, there's actually a link, isn't there, for everyone that wants to.
Yeah, there is, and we're going to be doing events around the country. We're going to be doing more online events, and you know, lots of different opportunities to be able to input people's views, but definitely, like,
it's really important everybody does that.
It really is.
Do
it really
it.
is.
Next one, you'll like this one. Defining complex needs.
Yeah.
Okay. So whole system hinges on qualifying for specialist provision package at the specialist tier, but complex needs isn't defined in the white paper. I totally get it's a difficult thing to define in a white paper. Who's going to set that threshold of what that is?
So we are, and we've said in the white paper that we are going to have a group of kind of independent experts who are going to come together, that will be education experts and experts on health, who will work, you know, we expect them to work with disabled children's organisations, parents, to develop this. There has already been some work done. So we've had an expert advisory group who have been looking at who is in the specialist system at the moment, what do they need, and what range of support do you need in a place. And so we published in one of the annexes the specialist provision packages, which hopefully you've seen, that sets out the work so far. And we wanted to be transparent because we knew people would kind of, what does this actually mean for my child? And I think the reason why we've decided to do it this way, to say that we need these national standards to set out these specialist provision packages, is because what we find at the moment is, in a place, you might have one special school that really caters well for children with kind of complex learning difficulties, but for children who are, say, like an internalising social and emotional needs, very, very academically gifted, but actually are really struggling with a mainstream environment. Actually, there's not a place potentially for that child in that area, and so we wanted to ensure that we had clarity of the kind of settings that you needed, and the kind of resource that those settings would need, that would set as a national standard, and then you can hold local authorities to account for ensuring those places are available. So when children need that provision, that it's there. And this is about building the kind of right range of provision in every place, because at the moment it's a real postcode lottery. So even, you know, a lot of families will say to me, I'll have an EHCP, it has everything written down, but my child's out of school because there is no place locally that meets their needs, or indeed travelling 2 hours.
And we get quite a lot of parents saying that their children sit in that send grey zone, if you like.
Send between us.
Yeah, that's too complex for a standard mainstream school, not complex enough for a specialist setting. So they're always, where does my child fit into this? Where do they go?
Yeah, and so within the specialist provision packages, for those who are listening who haven't read them, there are kind of three kind of broad ranges of provision we're talking about. A provision for those with different kind of physical disabilities, so maybe visual impairment and so on. Provision that is for children with learning difficulties or executive function needs, communication needs at the kind of that need that higher end support, and then for children with social emotional needs, either internalising or externalising. And this is really broad, okay, but it sets out the kind of provision that is available or should be available in a place. And in answer to your question, you know, I won't hear, I'm not, try and set out like a definition. I think it really needs to be done by those who have that expertise. But I think, we want a system that is needs-based. So if children's needs can be met well in a mainstream setting with the additional support that we've put in place, then, that is a really positive thing for those children and that inclusive environment. If their needs are so intense and higher that actually they need something more than that, then there is the option of specialist provision or a more intense package in a mainstream school. So, to give an example, if somebody is visually impaired, and they really want to be in a mainstream school, actually they might need a habilitation support or a qualified teacher of the visually impaired and assistive technology. That might need a specific package, because for that child, because it's not something the school is ordinarily providing. But I think where it comes, of course, and for your listeners, it's like what is the line and where does it sit? But I think something that I hope is reassuring for those listening is, at the moment, it feels like the line is it's sometimes like a cliff for families. You either get your EHCP, which sets something out, or there's really nothing, and it's very little in place for you. And within the new system, while you're if you're asking for an assessment or wanting support, there will be ring fence funding that goes to that school, and these experts at hands that we've talked about, education psychologists, speech and language therapists, occupational therapists, specialist teachers, that will wrap around schools. We think for the average secondary school, 160 days per year. For the average primary school, 40 days, that they'll have access to that support. So there will be professionals coming into the school, meeting children, working with children, supporting them. And so if an educational psychologist is coming in and working with a child at that targeted plus level, and actually, on one hand, they might be able to say, actually, this could really help, and we're going to put this in place, and that makes a massive difference, and they're really thriving. Or on the other end, they might say, actually, we really think this child needs specialist provision, and there is an evidence base and a piece of work that's done to be able to support them in that needs assessment, which is co-produced. So our intention is that where there it's less clear, it's less clear cut, that actually that feels like a much more collaborative process with people who've actually met your child, worked with your child within their setting. And the other thing I know we talked about recently, but I'd really like to say this for those who are listening, because it's something that has been misinterpreted sometimes, is this question of layers. Yeah. And when we're talking about layers of support, they're not sequential. You don't have to go through the universal, then targeted plus to apply for specialists. If you want to go forward for a needs assessment, at the first point, that that's going to be available for you. If a school, if you think that if it's clear that you need that targeted plus and support from day one, that's possible to do. We are really trying to put much more resource closer to children, so there's not lots of barriers, statutory processes. You don't need a diagnosis to draw on the experts at hand offer, that is just available really quickly to support families. And so that that's how we envision it working in the new system.
To tie a bow on that, so essentially, for anyone that doesn't really get that, when instead of looking at their child and going, well, my child is 7 years old and still in nappies and can't talk, instead of looking at it that way round, it's going to be looked at, where can your needs be met? Okay, your needs can be met by this mainstream in targeted plus, so you're targeted plus. It's in the reverse of what we all thought it was. It's the other way. Where can your needs be met? They can only be met in a specialist setting, so you're going to be in the specialist group. Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah. And and it's really understanding the needs of that child. Yeah. But also, we are really committed to any. What we're not saying is that you have to be in a specialist provision. If it's really important for that really important right, which is within our education system, to right to a mainstream education. So for those families who really want their child to be, who could be in a special school, but they want them to be in a mainstream school, we're really clear that EHCPs will continue to exist in mainstream schools, and that support, can be put in place to wrap around a child. But one of, I think, the real advantages of giving more ring-fenced money to schools to support children is that support can just be available. So at the moment, I hear this a lot from schools. You might be a child who's in year 5, and you fought for an EHCP as a school as well as the parent, and then it finally comes, and you might employ somebody for 2 years, and then the child leaves, and then actually that funding goes, and it's really hard to plan consistent provision. So over time, we do really hope that there will be more children who can be supported in mainstream school. And as you kind of bring forward some of the money that you would have spent on EHCPs, and I'm talking post 2030, and you start investing that like directly in schools. So we are putting some upfront new money in, but over time we want more money to be going into mainstream schools to just build the provision. So when a child's there, it's actually much easier just to meet their needs without needing to fight for money, like for different money to come forward, if that makes sense.
Pick one.
Pick one. Ooh,
the best one.
This one's one that comes up. Obviously, workforce reality.
Yeah.
The model relies heavily on speech therapists, educational psychologists, specialist staff, everything else like that. We already know professionals are in short supply. How do we overcome that? So if a child in 2027 is put into a school, but there's simply not the specialist there as set out, what happens to that child? What is the case here, and what is government doing to?
Yeah, I think, and that, on all of this is why we're taking such a staged approach. And, we need to, this is an area that we really need to build up. So it's not there at the moment, and we're really clear about that. And we want to build it up over the next few years. So the money and investment that we're talking about starts this kind of calendar year, the financial year. So from April so
onwards,
that money will start to go into places around the country, and we're working really closely with health on building up that workforce. So we put 40 million in for training. It's a new speech and language apprenticeship that's in place, training into educational psychologists as well. And so there's going to be a real focus on how we build up that workforce with health. It's embedded into their workforce plan, but really recognising that there are areas of the country which are kind of at the moment real cold spots. So I was talking to Parent Carer Forum in Isle of Wight, and they were talking about actually having to kind of go off the island in order to kind of get that access to support. So what part of the work we want to do over the next few years is making sure that there is that consistency of that offer, so we can be really clear by the time we're fully transitioning that that's in place. But I hope that one of the things that gives reassurance when we're talking about this is we've set out quite clearly what our expectation is. 160 days for a secondary, 40 days for a primary, as I was saying, and what that means in terms of workforce. We are going to be asking the Children's Commissioner to hold us to account around system readiness. So every year we're expecting to see things improve. New specialist places coming on board. We put 3.7 billion into that. Teachers being trained, we back with 200 million. We've said that every Best Start hub, so your early years support, will have a SEND practitioner, and we're putting 200 million into backing that up. That actually has to people have to see and feel that within their communities, within their schools, within their places. And we are going to be asking at that system level the Children's Commissioner to help us assess that system readiness. And one of the conversations we're having is how we ensure that the voices of young people are also part of assessing that change. But we also recognise the importance of accountability. And we talked about local authority accountability, but there's also accountability of integrated care boards and the health side, and accountability of schools. And we've changed Ofsted to include that focus on inclusion. So, as we go forward, in every area, we need to be really kind of monitoring the progress on developing this new system. And so it's something that people feel. And I think, something I have heard just so many times is the extent to which parents have been let down, the extent of failure, and that there's not a lot of trust in us as government, in local authorities, sometimes depending on their experience, sometimes in schools, and that people and it's very hard to trust if you're in a system where you're being failed and your needs aren't, and your child's needs are being met. And I just think it's just horrendous, the amount of people I've spoken to who've just had to watch their child fall behind, and they just know that something can be done and they haven't been able to, and the fight of the bureaucracy and so on. And so I think that this it has to get better, and we cannot do that on our own. It has to be a whole system change, working with families, and I'm really, really committed to building that trust. And I know that the only way to build it is to actually see the change on the ground. So we're saying really clearly this is a 10-year commitment to change. We've really heard from families and that it can't happen all at once. It has to be staged. We have to build that new system first. So it's not going to be overnight that everything is going to change, but every year it has to get better, and all these things need to come together to create a better system. So and in order to do that, we have to work together, and that's why it's so important to me that we continue this conversation. That where you're looking at it and feel actually you've not got that quite right, it's not going to work. It's not we need to hear that and to continue to look at solutions together. And there are a whole host of areas in the SEN consultation document where we've said quite explicitly where we don't have a full answer. For example, parental support. We really want to put more resource into parental support. There's lots of different ways to do that. We really welcome ideas on how to do that. We've talked about the needs assessment and co-designing it. So there's a whole host of areas we really hope that we can continue to work together on. And I'll re-emphasize, I really hope people can be part of a consultation. We want that to be a meaningful consultation.
Perfect.
Cool.
Well, I think we've run out of time.
We have run out of time.
Sorry, I'm sure there's loads of other things you wanted to ask.
Look,
it's fine.
We can maybe do a follow-up episode at some point.
No, thank you very much for
really
for
appreciate
taking the time. Really do appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Everyone that we spoke to that's worked with you, trusts you, likes you. They've got a lot of faith in what's coming.
That's a big responsibility.
I know, that's why I said it. But thank you.
I really feel that the responsibility of the stories that you've heard that people have shared with you is just as I said, it has to get better. But thank you so much, guys. Take care.